Alessia,
if there are any reactions, we can go on with the presentation of Sumathi. You can share the screen, Mrs. Subramaniam, and DG Education, YAF Sport and Culture, policy offers in the unit for policy on higher education. So she will add a valuable contribution on the resource allocation in higher education. Welcome, Mrs. Subramaniam.
Thank you. Do you see the screen that I'm sharing with you?
Yes, it's okay. Perfect. Very fine.
Yes, okay.
You can
Yes,
go.
okay. And okay, yes. Thank you for this invitation, and thank you also, Benedetto, for your presentation and analysis. I'd like to focus on the policy implications you just mentioned. Your report points out that European countries should keep their focus on the delivery of good quality university education and research. So this is what I'd like to focus on today: cooperation in Europe, which is focused on excellence, quality, and inclusion in education, research, and innovation, and service to society. So this work entails funding models.
Maybe there is a problem with the audio.
Funding, the science research.
Excuse
you can't hear me?
There is a small problem with the audio in this moment. Can you try to speak again? Because there are some moments in which the audio fall and then come again.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yes. Now it's fine.
Okay. Yes. So I am sharing the second slide with you if you see it.
The second slide, we don't see the screen.
I don't
we don't see the screen now. So I asked to my colleague to open the option sharing the screen and to habilitate your role. Just a moment. Okay. So you can share the screen. It's a small problem due to COVID-19 that's change our lives only always online. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to start by mentioning the science research and innovation performance of the EU. This is a biannual report. It was published just recently, 2 days ago maybe. And participants may know that may have seen this report. And here, the EU ranks among the top players in scientific production and excellence. So as you see on the slide that I'm sharing with you now, for example, accounting for 25% of top cited scientific publications on the topic of climate, and for 27% in the area of bioeconomy. When it comes to patent applications in these two areas, you will see that the EU is also leading the way with 24% in climate and 25% in bioeconomy. Okay. Yes.
Disappear again.
Does it move now to the next slide?
Okay. Now there is the screen. Okay, you can go on if you want. The next slide.
Okay.
Because you are
in
the sharing position, so you can.
Okay. Yes.
Otherwise, my colleague can share the screen for you with your presentation, so no problem.
Okay, so it's the third slide I will go on to now.
Okay.
So, so if you look at this slide, there are there are more efforts needed to turn research results into sustainable, marketable solutions. So it's a question of research and bringing research into market, I think, which is the question for Europe. So it's more efforts which are needed to turn research results into sustainable, marketable solutions, as well as to build a strong European research area and increase the effectiveness of public research systems. So excellence in research and innovation is linked to the quality of education and training, and the Commission will therefore coordinate education and training, research and innovation policies, and develop more synergies between its programs. The next slide. So as we saw from Benedetto's presentation, the European higher education institutions are funded predominantly through public sources, and this is based on Eurostat indicators. You will see the same as well. The approaches to allocate public funding in Europe are very varied, and they may include basic recurrent funding, funding formulae, performance contracts, agreements, performance-based funding, just to name a few. The next slide. What we are seeing is a diversification of funding sources. The share of third-party funds is increasing in many systems. And a key challenge for authorities is to find the right balance between public and private funding in higher education. The generation of additional income from external sources is important for the sustainability of our higher education institutions, and a prerequisite to use for the effective use of external funding is a sufficient level of core funding. So the diversification of funding sources increases the complexity of reporting, monitoring, and evaluation, which calls for enhanced capacity development in the state and in higher education administration as well. The next slide. So you see that in the current situation, performance funding mainly includes performance in reducing dropout and improving completion rates, and performance in graduate employability. But what we would like to see is a movement to include overall investment in higher education, evolution of student numbers, diversity and profiles of higher education institutions, linking of funding to staffing and financial autonomy systems needed for education, research, innovation, and the wider needs of economy and society. And the next slide. So to support these developments in funding of higher education institutions, the Commission is supporting several actions. And a good part of this work starts with higher education systems and higher education institutions themselves, where these four missions meet. So education and training, research and innovation, and service to society. What the Commission has done amongst activities is a peer counseling, which was conducted in Slovenia. Next slide. We also did a peer learning activity in Croatia, which was focused on the aspects of performance-based funding, which now present a technical challenge for national authorities that are gaining importance in recent years. So how to create the right conditions for a successful performance-based funding system, how to choose the right benchmarks and indicators to achieve diverse policy goals, how to move from output indicators to outcome measures, and how to successfully combine funding from different sources. Amongst the main messages on the design of indicators is that indicators should be reliable, consistent in interpretation, applicable to different institutions and systems, and comparable across time and space, and have European-wide relevance. Widening the scope of indicators to cover the three missions of higher education institutions, as well as personal development and active citizenship, would more accurately reflect the role of higher education in society today. So you see that we're looking at it with a whole institution approach, with all missions approach, whereas current rankings tend to focus more on research performance. The next slide. So together with the OECD, the Commission is doing an in-depth analysis of resourcing of higher education systems. This study will start very soon. And in the next slide, I show you higher education requires increased investments for education and research, and this puts a pressure on the state budgets. And the purpose of this review is to carry out an in-depth analysis of the resourcing of higher education systems, paying attention to the effectiveness and efficiency and equality. So the challenge, as I mentioned just now, is to find appropriate indicators to measure the performance of higher education institutions. And for this, the joint OECD Commission work will start off by developing an analytical framework, taking into account different funding sources, funding of education research and the third mission, third-party funding, allocation mechanisms, human resources, criteria related to learning and teaching, and research performance. And in the next slide, what you see is that the study will start on the 1st of June. And what we intend to do with this study is to review higher education systems in order to offer recommendations to countries on funding and human resources policies to enhance the performance of their higher education institutions. So it's allocation and management, profile of financial and human resources, and the use of the resources. In this next slide, you see the Ustream Project, which was co-funded by the Erasmus program. The Ustream Project aimed at exploring the key drivers, enablers, and barriers to efficiency of universities, collecting good practice and elaborating recommendations on how to foster efficiency, effectiveness, and value for money in higher education in the research context. The project partners included the European University Association, Irish Universities Association, and Universities UK, as well as the Central European University. Their final conclusions are in the form of a report which has been published, and this is available on the EUA website. The next slide shows you the considerations for policymakers which that study presented. And this include providing sustainable and adequate core funding, base expectations on realistic outcomes, link the efficiency to achievement of the university's goals and missions. And this may, depending on the diversity of the higher education institutions in Europe, this would differ. Reward universities for efficiency gains through incentives, maintain a strategic dialogue and promote peer learning, foster partnerships and sector-level collaboration, and establish bodies of services that enhance efficiency. So we're looking at a cooperation model to together lift the higher education institutions and the funding situation in Europe. In this next slide, I'll show you another action at EU level, which is a study which will soon be commissioned. It's a mapping study of performance-based funding models in the EU. This is at the request of many member states. Now, so far I've been talking about system level actions that the Commission is supporting. In this next slide, we see ETA, which is at the institutional level where the Commission is providing support. This is an instrument which has been developed, and Benedetto leads this, so he can tell you all about it. It is not a performance measure instrument. It gives you data on higher education institutions. It's a register of higher education institutions, but it can be used as a resource, a reference database for measures for designing of indicators and so on. One of the main aspects about ETA also is that it has a unique identifier which allows different data sets to be combined, and this allows cross-policy analysis, for example. So I'll move on to the next slide thereafter. So I'm on the slide with U Multirank, which is slide 17. And here you see that this is another one of the instruments that the Commission supports in addition to ETA. This is a performance-based initiative for higher education institutions at the level of higher education institutions, taking on a multi-dimensional perspective. It's user-driven, so the users choose which indicators they want to compare. It has mapping indicators, which allows the user to select universities of a similar quality to compare. And it's one of the biggest rankings, I would say actually the biggest ranking. It does not exclude higher education institutions. It allows benchmarking by through 5 different dimensions: teaching and learning, research, knowledge transfer, international orientation, regional engagement. We are in the process, and Franz Kaiser is of course one of the members in this consortium, the process of developing this tool year by year. And in particular, in this current phase, we would like to concentrate on teaching and learning indicators. The next slide shows some of the potential that's inherent in U Multirank. Countries which have enough of their higher education institutions represented can also obtain country-specific information. And on the 9th of June, they will publish this year's ranking, and so you can look at the different country-specific profiles that U Multirank will publish as well. Now, another initiative, this in the next slide, is the European Graduate Tracking Initiative, and this is an initiative to compare for comparative EU data on graduate incomes. And why do we need this? In the next slide, we see this is important for information for planning, steering higher education policy, for guiding study choices for students, and to provide intelligence and information on the labor market. So these are initiatives at it's ETA, it's U Multirank, and graduate tracking, all initiatives at the level of higher education institutions or students. In this next slide, what I would like to show you is that funding organizations and higher education institutions are focused on incentivizing and rewarding a small number of academic activities for evaluating research and research careers. This is the current situation. Publishing research and journal impact factors, H-index, citation impact, attracting external research funding. These are some of the most important components. However, what I would like to bring to your attention is that this picture is changing in Europe. Funding organizations and universities are reviewing their approaches to research assessments and academic career assessments because there is a need to evolve to reflect changes in the research and innovation landscape in Europe. Many higher education institutions already have open science or open access policies, but these policies need to be translated into incentives and reward structures for research and assessment and research career assessment. Currently, there is a broad dialogue and a partnership approach between different stakeholders, which is taking root. What does this mean for us today for this discussion? We see that there is a push for research assessment and career assessments to value teaching, to value research, leadership, impact, patient care, science, teamwork, for example, which means that the impact on the current indicators that are used will change as well. So there are many examples of systems that I can quote. Netherlands is one example. The University of Ghent is another place where these types of rethinking of assessments, be they research assessments or research career assessments, is taking place. The European University Association recently ran a series of webinars on this topic as well, and I would recommend that you take a look at these webinars, which are available online. So in conclusion, what I'd like to emphasize is that both at systems and higher education levels in Europe, the topic of funding is in a state of change. Even though the majority of rankings still see research excellence as a proxy for overall quality, the push for transparency and accountability in Europe is driving the distribution of public funds and other revenues to influence excellence, quality, and inclusion. So the three components in research, in education and training, research and innovation, and moving away from a limited number of indicators as a measure of a limited set of activities in higher education, research and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Subramaniam, for your presentation, for your speech, underlining this last word, inclusion, that is very important for young European. And I would like to tell you that there is a question from the audience. Mr. Youngblood has a question, so you can switch on the microphone, Mr. Youngblood, and address your question to Mrs. Subramaniam, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessia. Thank you, Subramaniam, for your presentation. I was wondering about some of the projects you mentioned. Some of them have already finished, but there seem to be a couple that are still going to be taking place. So you mentioned the mapping project, where you would like the performance-based funding systems across Europe being mapped. Has that study already been commissioned, and is it, and if yes, who is doing it? That's a simple question. Yeah. Another question, if I may, now that Alessia, is it okay? Yeah. Another question is, or maybe I should switch on my camera. Another question is, you seem to suggest that funding systems can be made to work better by including more outcome-based measures instead of output measures. Well, I happen to be doing a lot of research on performance-based funding, and there's a lot of mixed evidence on the effects of performance-based funding across the world. But my question to you is, can you fix
Okay. Excuse me, Mr. Youngblood, Sumathi is coming out now from the conference for probably a technical problem of connection. So we are searching to invite Sumathi in the conference right now. So please, 1 minute, and then we will solve the technical problem right now.
Sorry, it just completely switched off on its own.
Okay.
Yes.
You are here in the platform.
Yes.
Sumathi?
So
Okay.
I heard the first part of the question about the mapping study. We are in the process of drawing up the tender process for the study. So it is in the process of being commissioned. The call is not out yet. I did not, I'm afraid, hear your second question.
Okay, I'm very interested in the call, by the way. Okay. The second question was, if there are problems with higher education systems and their performance, my simple question is, can you fix, you seem to suggest that, can you fix everything through a clever performance-based funding system?
No, we cannot fix everything through a performance-based funding system. And we also have to remember that some of the systems work on performance agreements. But what we can do is to share best practice on what the components of these performance agreements or performance-based funding mechanisms are, which is what the Commission is trying to do with the support that it's giving through peer counseling and peer learning, and also this study that will be commissioned to look for best practice and to try and link it up to the outcomes and not to the outputs.
Yeah, outcomes are notoriously difficult to measure. Huh?
Yes.
And so you seem to be very optimistic on that. But, well, is there any solid data, and maybe Benedetto and others in the RISIS project can help with that? Are there any solid data on outcomes, and which data do you think are worth looking at when it comes to this suggestion that you're making?
Benedetto, would you like to answer that?
You are mean on data on graduate outcomes? That's a question we keep going.
Outcomes.
That's a question we keep going, getting around ITER, and you know that there is also empirical evidence which is puzzling. So I think some American studies show that the learning of most graduates is almost zero. So it's a question whether this is a way of transfer competencies. My opinion is there are strong limits on what you can get in terms of measures of outcomes. It's much easier, and probably it's the only thing you can measure reliably is about incomes or employability. This is something I do think we could be measured in a few years. There are lots of methodological issues, but it's much easier. I don't think we can start measuring outcome. Of course, what could be done is to have surveys and to couple surveys with censuses like ITER, because one thing is you have information on all institutions. One thing you have samples based on surveys of people. But frankly, I'm not very optimistic we can measure something easily in that respect. If we want to do something comparative, I would first go to look into employment, and a perspective might be, but requires, of course, having good people identifiers, which is possible in some of the Nordic systems, coupling them with labor force information. Because one thing is income, one thing is to know in which sectors and which qualifications people work, which is in the labor force surveys is usually available, but except probably in Nordic countries, this is not connected to student data, so you cannot trace persons around. I think this would be a good indicator. You don't always assume that clever people go to good positions and stupid people, sorry, to less good position, but the two are probably reasonably correlated in general. So if we could know where students go, and this would require harmonizations of registers, we would have some much better indications.
Okay, thank you very much. There was another question from Mrs. Reale. Mrs. Reale, you can take the floor and switch on the microphone. Okay, thank you.
Yes, it's a comment and question to both the speakers, to Benedetto first, but also to Sumathi. So what for me is extremely interesting from the presentation of Benedetto is to understand that it is not only the level of funding, which is very important to keep high in the ranking, but also the structure of funding. This is something new, I think, in the higher education literature. And we can see also that this is a constraint to some extent for being high in the ranking, because in the comparison that, and in the figures that Benedetto presented, there was this important element of the amount of donation which formed the budget of the US universities which are top of the pile. So I think it's the structure of funding is something which can be introduced as a further element of heterogeneity between higher education institutions. And I wonder how far this different structure, which is a context data, I mean, is something that is difficult to move because it's strongly related to the system of higher education existing in the country. How far this element is keeping on board in the OECD work on performance-based funding.
Okay, should I say something? So I think, Emanuela, you are perfectly right with a small edit. It's not just a structure of funding by the usual categories, whether it's donation, core, etc., but it's what we are calling in a paper we are working on, the underlying business model. So the business model of the top ranked university is that you get money based on your excellence. Now, you might be Stanford, and this excellence-related money comes from private donors. You are Cambridge, and you get it from the REF. You are ETH Zurich, and you get it from the national states, but the underlying value mechanism is the same. Even ETH Zurich, which is in a public system, they have a deal, say, we get a lot of money because we are excellent, and we will keep excellence. So the business model is based on excellence. Whereas the business model of most European universities, you have a lot of students, you get money based on students, and since it's important to have research alongside education, so the old Humboldtian model, you get a bit of money more for doing research. These are two different business models, and you are right, it's very difficult to change business models on the university side and on the political side. Which means these are lasting, I think Andrea Bonacosi in that is right, are lasting institutional structures. And one lesson you get from the US case is how important to have funding models that obey to different businesses, which is not the case in Europe. So the underlying business model, underlying public funding in Europe is basically more or less the same with some variations. The biggest variation is that you think the model might be only education for colleges and in respect to university, but it's not always true. So it's important to differentiate exactly because you have an heterogeneous set of higher education institutions following different goals, and they cannot have the same business models underlying. So what is striking of the European funding system is how uniform it is. So in the composition of resources, in how it is allocated, and how much money comes per student, etc.
Yes, and if I may supplement, the resources review with the OECD will take into account all these other types of funding in addition to public funding, and it will try to look at efficiency, effectiveness, and equality through all different types of indicators as well. But as Benedetto says, we are trying to look at two different funding structures in the US and in Europe. And so whether we try, it's not a question of the resources review trying to increase only research excellence or the excellence aspect of it, but we're trying to see how to increase the performance of higher education institutions across all missions. So the starting line is different in these two cases.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Subramaniam, to have underlined these differences between the different targets. And I would like to ask the audience if there are any other wish to participate in the debate, to add comments or reactions. Okay, we still have 10 minutes to do question, to add comment. Anyone else? Okay, so I thank you very much for having participated to our policymakers session. Thank you, Mrs. Emanuela Reale, Mr. Benedetto Lepori, and Mrs. Sumathi Subramaniam. Mr. Lepori, do you want to add something to the discussion? I see your microphone on. I would like to remind you that all the presentation and the conference will be published through our website and through our social channels. And the next events we are organizing are the publication of the third issue of our newsletter, in which you can find all the information, the news, and the result of RISIS project, and the next policymaker session organized for 9th of July, probably using the same platform, so GoToMeeting, and entitled Mapping Research and Development to Policy Goals and Societal Challenges, with a very valuable research from Leiden University. So I thank you again, I thank you every participant, and in particular way the speakers. And see you, I hope to see you again in the next RISIS events. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining the RISIS community. Bye-bye.
And thank you to the organizing team for mastering this online event, which is a novelty.
Okay. Thank you.